Alright, this is the second video for the intelligence unit. This is Unit 8, Testing and Individual Differences. Most of the information can be found in your textbook on pages 532 to 538. You will be filling out in your reading guide on pages 6 and 7. So let's begin. So last video we talked all about how do you define intelligence. That was kind of the big topic. This section is going to look at intelligence testing. So assessing one's intelligence and intelligence testing. Psychologists define intelligence testing as a method for assessing an individual's mental aptitude and comparing it with others. So how well can they perform in terms of certain skills like sequencing and memory, and compare it to others, specifically even comparing it to others in their age group. Okay, so the origins of intelligence testing. So when did tests actually begin to change our lives? So in the early 1900s, think about the school system. It was very unified. There were single rooms. There was very little testing. A teacher may have a kindergartner and an 8th grader all in the same room with all different abilities. The IQ testing began in France in the early 1900s. Every student at this point in time was they had to attend school. They made it a law. Okay, so they began to notice differences in children's abilities. They would group kids together at this point in time by their age group, and they noticed why are some 8-year-olds performing better, or they can move faster through the material, and some 8-year-olds couldn't. So they didn't want the teachers to subjectively define the student's ability. Okay, so here's my smart kids and here are my slower kids. All right, so Alfred Binet, he was French, was asked to examine the problem. How can we fix this? What can we do? Okay, so how should we figure out maybe who is slower and who is faster, and can we give them something in order to figure this out? So Alfred Binet, he assumed all children follow the same course of intellectual development. So he just thought that all of us develop in the same pattern, some develop just faster. He really looked at his 2 kids in order to kind of figure out what was going on. He found that some kids are dull, he called them, and they perform as a younger child. So he looked at maybe an 8-year-old and another kid who was 8 but didn't perform at the same academic ability. So he would call them dull, not slow, just kind of dull, like a dull pencil. And then some children who would perform better than the 8-year-olds in their class, these were known as the bright students. Okay, he thought that, all right, so now I really, instead of just figuring out that the kid's age is 8, let's figure out their mental age, which would be in comparison to other age groups, where do they stand? So he wanted to figure out the mental age, the level of performance typically associated with a certain chronological age. Okay, so your mental age, okay, your chronological age is you're all 18 right now. Okay, but does that really mean your mental age? Okay, if you're performing as the rest of your peers, then yes, your mental age would be 18. However, if you're reading faster and you can get stuff done really quick, okay, your mental age may be something like 20 or 22. They would test 9-year-olds and find out the average ability. Then they would set a mental age. If a student was performing below the mental age of their age group, they would have the mental age of a 5-year-old or, let's say, a 7-year-old. Okay, so kind of what I just explained. He did not try to understand why children performed higher on some tests than lower. So he wasn't trying to figure out, like, well, what can I do to get my kids to be scoring at the, my kid's 8. I want them to score at an 11-year-old. He wasn't trying to figure that out. He was just trying to figure out how kids really, this mental age ability. Alfred Binet created a general test to identify students that needed remediation. Okay, he created one of the first intelligence tests. He looked at memory and sequencing, so can you put things in certain order? Okay. He started classifying kids based on their age and their speed. The mental age is the average age at which children could successfully answer a particular level of questions. Your chronological age is your actual age, so don't get that confused. Tests were designed to identify French school children needing special attention. So I want you to note that. The test was originally designed to identify students who were in school that needed special help. Okay. His biggest fear were kids would get labeled or limit their opportunities in the future. Okay, so, oh, those are the slow kids, or, oh, those kids can't take an AP class, right? That was his fear with designing this test. But he did want to have really high intentions. He did want to help kids, but he didn't want it to kind of translate into what we're dealing with now, where tests can begin to label kids. So to give you a visual, this is Alfred Binet. All right, Theodore Simons also in your notes, 1873 to 1961. He is very famous because he was Alfred Binet's assistant. He helped Binet design the mental age and the first tests, intelligence tests. So you also should know him. Tests were coming to America. The idea of IQ testing became popular in America for 3 reasons. The first reason was now we had huge increase in immigration at this point in time. So the early 1900s, there was a lot of people coming to America. They wanted to start maybe limiting the amount of people coming to America, so maybe they can give certain people tests to try and figure out their intelligence. New laws requiring universal education was on the push. So you saw in France, it was now required for students to attend school, every child to attend education. And then it started spreading to America. Now we have it where every kid in America is required a free education to a certain age. And then military was assessing new recruitments for World War I. They needed to figure out who can be part of the military. What certain skills do you need in order to be a part of the military? So these are the 3 reasons why testing became really popular. It was easy to do, administer. It wasn't too expensive, and that's kind of why we still have testing today. It creates an inexpensive and objective way to separate those who could benefit from education or military, leadership training, and those who needed some assistance. Okay. Lewis Terman, then, he's from the United States. He expanded the intelligence testing to kind of more familiar tests of what we see today. He was a Stanford University professor. He found that Paris-developed questions and age norms worked poorly in California school children. He saw that the tests that they were creating didn't really fit how the American children are reacting to certain things. So he changed, adapted, added, and established new norms. He also expanded the age group from teenagers to superior adults. So it used to just kind of stop at teenagers, but he believed that adults should also be assessed. The new name became known as the Stanford Binet test. He asked a series of questions, and then once he found that they were no longer able to answer the questions, they had actually reached their mental age. So, I could start asking you math questions, and after maybe I ask an 8-year-old what is, x divided by y times by 100, the kid might be lost at that point in time. He created, most children versions of the test had pictures, and adult versions had an analogy. So we've seen some analogies on our test. The parasympathetic is to the sympathetic as the nervous system is to the endocrine system. Those are analogies. Here's an example of a child's test that may have been developed at this point in time. So you got a rabbit, a carrot, a rabbit, a carrot, a rabbit. Hopefully, okay, you guys would know that the next one sequence would be the carrot. And then you have the butterfly, the frog, the bee, the butterfly, the frog, the bee. Hopefully, you would say the butterfly. Okay. The intelligence quotient then was developed at this point in time once they had the test. William Sturm derived the intelligence IQ or intelligence quotient from tests like the Stanford Binet. So once they had that test score, okay, or that mental age, I should say, the mental age of the kid, then they developed a little quotient of how to figure out your intelligence score. So on the top was your mental age. That was where you're performing in comparison to other people in your age group. So your performance, let's say you're at 20. Okay, that's your mental age. Your chronological age then would be 18. They would times that by 100, and that would be your intelligence score. So underneath it, I did an example for you. Let's say your mental ability is your 10-year-old mental ability. And underneath it, you're actually 10 years old. You times that by 100, what would your intelligence quotient be? It would be 100. Okay, another example would be you are 10 years old mental ability, but you're actually 8 years old, so you have a really higher mental ability. So you times that by 100, and your score would be 125. So maybe get out a calculator, maybe get out your phone, pause it for a second, and let's see if you can figure this one out, because the test does require you to be able to calculate the intelligence quotient. So if Sandy was able to complete the IQ test at the mental age of 10 years old, but her real age is 9, her intelligence quotient or intelligence score would be what? So you should be putting the mental age 10 on the top, divided by 9 on the bottom, and then you times that by 100, and you should get 111. Okay, here's another one. Maybe stop it, pause it. Tom also completed the intelligence test, but it revealed that his mental age was 7 and his real age is 8. His intelligence quotient would be what? So 7 divided by 8 times it by 100, you would get that score of 87. Okay, so that's kind of how they figured out the intelligence quotient. Again, you'll be required to be able to figure out the intelligence quotient. So intelligence today, the original formula worked well for children, but not for adults. Should a 40-year-old who tested as an average 20-year-old have an intelligence quotient as 50? So after a while, how far can you expand that mental age of an adult to not have, then you divide it by their actual age, you're going to get a lower score. So the IQ or the quotient is not used today. Instead, people are assessed by a test. So they get a score and receive a score by comparison to somebody in their age group. So a lot of times you get the score and then you're clumped or you're assessed depending on your age. The legacy of tests today is still something that we use. The original implication was to help students who struggled. So that was what Alfred Binet really wanted to do. He wanted to help out the struggling students. However, tests today, they label students. Okay, to remind one of somebody's status. Tests are used as a powerful tool to kind of weed out, if they need to weed out certain individuals. Okay, and then it obviously limits individuals, because if you have a certain score, you may not be able to do certain things. Modern tests today, okay, different tests that you take and that you need to know. The first one is an aptitude test. This is a test designed to predict a person's future performance. So they're going to give you this test, and how well you do on the test may predict how well you're going to do in the future. Can't really study for these. These are more just if you have the skill set. It's not like you're basically memorizing a list of numbers. This is like the ACT, the SAT, okay, an intelligence test. The achievement test now, this is what you take on a regular basis. Tests used to assess what you've learned, what you have learned. So these are unit tests, okay, these are final exams, and this is the AP test for psychology. Okay, that's an achievement test. How much did you learn? You really need to know the difference between these two and be able to give examples of these two. Okay, the IQ test that a lot of you have been wondering about. David Wechsler was the person who designed the more modern day intelligence test that we use on a regular basis. The Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, he came up with the WAIS. There's also the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children, the WISC, and they also have one for preschool age kids. So if you may have a disability when you were younger, if you had a disability, if they noticed you had a disability, they may give you this intelligence test to see where you track compared to other students. Okay, if you've gone to a psychologist and or a specialist when you were little, you may have been given an intelligence test. The WAIS consists of 11 subtests and can be broken into verbal and performance categories. I will give you a sample of what one looks like in class. Okay, the big areas are listed below. At the end, it gives you an overall score, but it also scores it into categories, some things that you're good at, strong suits versus maybe weak things. Kind of like the ACT breaks it apart into English from what you scored on, okay, and then maybe what you scored in math. It kind of shows you what your different strong areas and your weaker areas. Different areas that the test looks at is just verbal general information. It looks at similarities, arithmetic reasoning, comprehension, vocabulary, digital span. It also looks at performance, picture completion, picture arrangement, block design, object assembly, and the digit symbol substitution. So here's kind of an example of different things that you can be assessed on. So verbal general information, what day of the year is Independence Day, similarities, in what ways are, I think it says, wool and cotton alike. There's some math problems there. If eggs cost 60 cents a dozen, what does one egg cost? Vocabulary. Tell me the meaning of corrupt. Comprehension. Why do people buy fire insurance? Digital span. Okay, it says, listen carefully, and when I am through, say the numbers right after me. Okay, so it asks you to listen to numbers. Now I'm going to say some more numbers, but I want you to say them backwards. Picture completion. I'm going to show you a picture with an important part missing. Can you tell me what part is missing from this picture? Picture arrangement. The pictures below tell a story. Put them in the right order. You have to look at block design. Okay, object assembly. You have to assemble the dog. And then a substitution in terms of the different, where would you put the pictures or the codes for the substitution. So again, nothing that you can really study for on this. It's more, do you know the information? Do you not know the information? Okay, so the next part that we're going to look at in terms of testing is there's 3 different criteria for testing construction. And I know in your notes it says IQ test construction there. To be widely accepted, psychologists have a criteria for test construction. First thing is it needs to be standardized. Second thing, it needs to be reliable. And the third one is validity. Okay, is it valid? So first thing we'll look at is standardization. Standardization is the number of questions you have asked correctly on an intelligence test would tell us nothing. So to evaluate your performance, we need to base a basis for comparing it with others' performance. Right? So if I just gave you your number, you wouldn't even know what that means unless you know what other people in your age group are getting. Defining meaningful comparisons, test makers first give the test to a representative sample of people. Your score will then be compared to their score. Okay, so let's say your ACT, when it was first designed, maybe it was given to a group of similar 18-year-old students. So now they have their standardized group. Then they'll give it to you guys, and they'll give you the score based upon maybe looking at their scores. Okay, so they kind of set the standard for the test. People that take tests are compared against the sample group. And usually then they group that, or they are able to create the curve. Okay, the average ranges between 85 to 115. And I'll explain this in a minute. So the normal curve, group members' scores typically are distributed in a bell-shaped pattern that forms the normal curve. The midpoint is 100. The majority of the test takers, let's say, get 100. So here's the bell-shaped curve. Okay, when I give out tests, all right, there's usually a chunk of students who I get an average. Usually that average is right around a 70%. And then I have a couple people that get, you know, the 90s, and I have a couple people that get maybe the 50%. All right, but when you want your test to really fall in this bell-shaped curve. And what they find out, the normal scores on aptitude tests tend to form a normal or bell-shaped curve around an average score. For the Wechsler scale, for example, the average score is 100. So you could see, if you look at here, okay, the lime green, all right, 68% of the people that took that test fell right around the 100 mark. Okay, either they got an 85 to 115. That's a big chunk of people getting right around that 100 score. Okay, 68% of people score within the 15 point above or below. All right, and then you have, I would say between 70 to 85, you have about 13% on that, a little bit below average. And then you have the 15 to 130 is the 13% above average. And then you have your, I would say your 4%, 2 really below that and 2 above it that are kind of like your high flyers. Okay. If you had everybody getting 130, that wouldn't necessarily be a very valid test. Everybody is getting way too high of a score. You're not really challenging. You're not really figuring much out. Okay, so some people question Einstein's intelligence when you're looking at the IQ scores. His was way above 160 when he took intelligence tests. So standardization tests are constantly re-standardized. So the first test that was designed all the way to today, there's been various different tests that have been designed because they have to constantly be re-standardizing them. James Flynn, a researcher, found in this kind of what is known as the effect. He noticed a substantial increase in average scores on the intelligence test over the world as the years went on. He's seeing our scores as increasingly they have to re-standardize our tests, and they continuously get more challenging, and our test scores are continuously going up. He noticed this as the Flynn effect. So maybe it's because the increase in our education and increase in testing performance. We're continuously going to these ACT classes. We're continuously testing in schools. Maybe that's why the intelligence scores have gone up. Okay, and they don't so much go up because they keep improving the tests. All right, so you're not going to see people now getting 130s, more people getting 130s or 140s. Okay, if maybe we were going by the old test, yes, that is the case. But now since they're redeveloping the test, pretty much our IQ scores are staying the same. Standardization needs to occur for the current generations. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. And it's really hard to compare ourselves to the past generations because we keep using different tests. So are we smarter? Are we maybe a little bit slower? In terms of our test scores or our test information, they say that we're projectively getting better. Reliability is another component besides standardization. Reliable. Is the test consistent? Okay, reliability, a test yields the same results over and over and over again. Okay, so you're getting the same bell-shaped curve over and over. You're not getting one group of people totally falling way below it or way above it. Most people, if you give the test, they stay on this bell-shaped curve. The way you can figure out if a test is reliable, let's say you had a 40-question test. You split the test in half. Okay, they call it the split half reliability test. And if the average score on the kids, let's say on one test is the first 20 questions is let's say the average score is an 18 out of 20, and the average score for the other half is an 18 out of 20, then you have reliable data because you're splitting in half and they're getting the same results. Or you can retest. So you can use the test year after year after year, and you're getting the same data from the kids back. Okay. I'm able to see reliability in terms of I give the test to period 1, give the test to period 3, give the test to period 5, 6, and the same questions are marked wrong by the students. So maybe I know which ones, majority of the students are getting the same questions wrong. Okay, and Miss D and myself compare our data too, and oftentimes the same test questions are missed between the two classes. Validity is another component. So psychologists rely heavily on testing individuals, part of the foundation of psychology. To be effective, however, validity is another component. Validity, does the test actually measure what it says it's going to measure? Okay, so if I'm teaching you AP Psych, am I giving you a math test? No, it's not valid then because I'm not testing you based upon what you need to know. So the first one is content validity. Okay, each part of the test is a representative of the larger body of knowledge. So this would be, I'm testing you right now, or I'm going to test you on Unit 8. The majority of that test should be on Unit 8. I shouldn't have a ton of stuff from Unit 10 on there. Okay, predictive validity is the success with which a test predicts the behavior it is designed to predict. So each week I give you, or every 3 weeks I give you a unit test. Okay, I use the test bank that the AP has created. Okay, so if you're scoring, let's say, an 80% on average on those tests, then that should predict that you're probably going to score a 70 or an 80 maybe on the AP test. Okay, I'm not creating my tests, right? It's not me writing them. If I were writing them, that wouldn't really give you a good prediction about how well you were going to do in the future. So this kind of wraps up our notes on for the second video for assessing tests. You should know the different types of tests that you could have, and you should know the construction or what are big parts of tests that you need to have: validity, standardization, and reliability.